Well, hello. How is everybody on a Thursday evening? A little bit later than usual. Well, this is my time of night, if you all know me. Nice to see so many of you here. Well, we're going to talk about the Masterson Re-Trial again. We're going to go over several of the days that have happened. We're going to go over days 6, 7, and 8, which would be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We can cover Wednesday in full now. We're going to move Friday, just as a note. Friday, I normally do another Masterson Re-Trial, which would be like Wednesday, Thursday, and part of Friday. We're going to move that to Monday. And yeah, I'm going to buckle up and actually get myself ready and do a Monday because, this trial is really important. This one's addressing quite a few issues that are something I like to speak on, that I do see the need for some change in some things that are quite frustrating and that still continue in our society, in our legal system, in just our culture in general, that I find distasteful. We're just trying to address it in a respectful way and try to see if we see any change going on in these legal proceedings, especially. Well, we started on Monday. We started on Monday on the Masterson trial with Jane Doe 1. We had already heard from Jane Doe 3, and we went over all of her testimony again. If you'll remember that's Christy Bixler, and she had been in a relationship for quite a number of years with Danny Masterson. She has 2 events listed, only 1 charged. And she went into great details again, and wasn't giving the details out, but although the testimony itself, almost word for word, is available, as I keep praising the work of Tony Ortega as one of the journalists that is there in the courtroom, documenting everything back and forth. He is very strong in his advocacy for people that are getting out of Scientology and for documenting in the lawsuits that are going on Scientology. He is not a fan, of course, of Scientology, and I don't blame him for his bias at all. I support him for doing what he's doing journalistically and still trying to report it accurately on both sides, and he's doing a darn good job. Um, Whatever his personal leanings are, he's doing a darn good job of getting the information out there. And I praise and commend him, and I ask you all to also. We do have the links in the description there, and I'll be dropping other links today to different articles that he's written on it. He has a YouTube channel where he'll do a brief for you, like a few minutes, maybe anywhere from 6 to 14 minutes, depending on the day, every day of trial, just a little synopsis. But some of the legal back and forth that I like to follow isn't really in there in detail, and I'm going to be going over much more of that today. Um, uh, starting with the fact that Jane Doe 1, if you all remember from the first trial, Jane Doe 1 was a target for the defense, and they quite relentlessly went after all of her words. The misuse of a word here and there, whether she meant, just like with Jane Doe 3, they attacked the fact, did you mean slap or punch? She never said the word slap. The actual detective said the word slap and wrote it into the report. And that's documented as so, but they keep leaning this way like that's not the right word that they used in this and that. They're very good at trying to discredit the witnesses. They're really being myopic at this point on every little word, every little statement. But here's the thing. We have a case to where it started in 2016, 2017. The events are from prior to that, in 2001 and forward. Every statement that's made is going to be a little bit different, depending on who is taking the statement, who's asking the questions, how comfortable they are in answering the questions. I mean, am I wrong in thinking that a reasonable person would allow for any of those kind of slight differences and variations? I mean, when we get down to it, the event that they are reporting never changes. That never changes. Okay. The description of it may alter slightly, but the event itself and what they're saying happened does not change. Not the date, not the where, not the when, not the who, and the how. That remains consistent. Verbalizing it and whether or not they gave 100% of every detail during every statement, which seems to be a bone of contention with one particular lawyer, that would be Philip Cohen for the defense on Masterson. Oh, well, you never mentioned this when you spoke to this person about that. And they're like, well, I just answered the questions. And this is all the Jane Does are responding the same way. They're pushing back with, that's not what I said. I don't recall saying that. He'll show them something. They'll say, well, it's not that they're different. It's just that this report doesn't have it in it and this report does. But it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Period. And it seems like they're very, it appears they're much stronger this time around because they know what to expect. As a matter of fact, Jane Doe 3's testimony, she clearly stated, I wish I knew now how to respond to every question with 100% accuracy and every detail I could muster, going into greater detail than what's asked of me, because then when I have to face someone like you, meaning Philip Cohen or Sean Hawley or anyone on the defense or anywhere else, then all of my words would stand for itself. Well, she clearly said, I am not lying. I am not withholding the truth. I am saying everything as accurately and as honestly as I can. When asked a question in great detail, they get a great detailed answer. But let's be honest. When filing out the reports for the police department, okay, when they filed their first submissions, when they were first telling people about it, these stories are going to be slightly different. They're going to be based on the interviewers. They're going to be based on who you're talking to. That's reasonable to me. That's almost like common sense, and I'm hoping that the jury gets it. And I will say that right now, the way I'm looking at all the testimony over the last few days in the week prior, the defense is still keeping on their tactic. Like, oh, well, everything about Scientology is prejudicial. And they have made this whole thing up. There's holes in their stories. They just comply. They're just conspirating together so they can have a civil lawsuit to get all of this money. But this time around, it's not really hitting the mark like it did the first time. It does not appear to be grabbing any teeth. But then again, that's going to be up to a jury. I'm just saying the way I'm looking at it right now, what I'm hearing is falling short a little bit because of how specifically the Jane Does themselves are answering when they are accused of these things. When they are accused of not telling the truth, or why did you say this instead of that? They are fighting back. They're saying, I'm sorry, that's your word. You're misconstruing what I said. You're making more out of what I said than what it was. By omitting that statement does not mean it didn't happen. They are actively pushing back. They have considered what happened to them in the first trial, and by themselves, they have come to the conclusion that they need to actually defend themselves, because what's going on in this trial is victim blaming. The defense's answer to all of it is that you guys are just doing this. You guys are just doing this. It's not true. You're just making it up. You're just conspiring to get money. That's it. And actually using what happened to them and how they felt about it, and they couldn't report. Why didn't you report it? Because it never happened. Why did you wait so long? Because it took too long for, now you want to get some money out of it. Really kind of distasteful. It's hard to say. I understand the defense has to do an absolute the best that they can for Danny Masterson, and he deserves a fair trial. I don't want to slam against him like he doesn't get to defend himself against the accusations, because he does. But there is a way to do it. But all of the laws that protect victims of these type of crimes seem to be, in the cross-examinations, seem to be getting quite close to violating them. And Judge Olmedo is doing her best. But I have to say, over the last couple of days, it's been quite evident that they're wearing thin on Judge Olmedo having to admonish and correct people for going a little too far, which seems to be this judge who is very well versed in very difficult cases. This woman handles gang cases constantly. She's in LA. Okay. Very tough judge. Okay. She knows how to walk that fine line between prejudicial and probative. Okay. She knows what witness intimidation looks like. She knows how just certain words or certain presence of people can intimidate people. And all of that came to light this week in some rather spectacular ways. You know, the first day of the trial on Monday, the first day of the week rather of the second week of trial on Monday, the first thing that was discussed was the fact that attorney Vicky Podboreski had been attending. Now, she was there Friday when Jane Doe first took the stand in the very late afternoon, which we didn't report on. Okay. Um, she was there behind the prosecution, behind DA Mueller. Okay. And it appears that Jane Doe, during her questioning, uh, was affected by it. She got intimidated. Not so much that she was there, but by her actions. She says she saw her reacting to her words, making faces, doing a hair flip, kind of rolling her eyes, doing sarcastic stuff, things like this. She felt intimidated. She did look for someone from the DA's table, from the state, to tell, and she did tell someone that, oh, by the way, Vicky Probert, she was here. But when they went to look for her, she wasn't there. Well, lo, come Monday, because during the weekend, it comes out during the whole day that she sent an email to the prosecution to say that she felt intimidated, whatever. This is what the woman did with the hair flips and all of this. Well, the this the defense doesn't hear the whole story until Monday, and they want to, well, they want to admonish everybody because number one, they weren't told about it on Friday, but actually Jane Doe one didn't actually go into great detail with anybody on Friday. She just said that she was there and she just felt late. And then it came to light how she was feeling. It bothered her. These are her words. She said it really bothered her over the weekend, and she decided to write the message or a text message or an email of some sort to one of her handlers over there. It was probably D.A. Anson or one of them, whoever's in charge of the correspondence between the two, and about the event. And then discussion was held. She felt intimidated. That's the fact. And so that was an issue for Monday for Judge Almeida to deal with, is the fact that the witness herself did not feel she gave her best testimony, that she didn't give her best light to the jury because she hesitated. Felt intimidated. She started to not answer as quickly as she would, and she started hesitating. And it started to bother her that this actually was working, that what this woman was doing with her. So she reported it. And because she reported it a couple of days, with not immediately, like right on the stand, like she didn't jump up and point at the woman and say, that woman's intimidating me. She didn't do that because, okay, we're all reasonable people here, right? That's not how intimidation works. People just don't stand up and go, oh yeah, that's what they're doing. No, intimidation makes you be quiet, makes you start second guessing yourself, makes you think about what you're doing because they're putting pressure on you. So that did work, and it did delay her from going forward. And now the defense wants to use it. Oh, of course. We know. And I say that this is like, it's so funny because it's true. You know that defense attorney Philip Cohen was standing there with his hand waving up in the air, like mistrial. Like, I got a reason to call you up here, Judge Olmedo, for a mistrial, because they didn't tell us right away. And well, he asked Judge Almeida to make the prosecution write a detailed report for them on everything that occurred from Friday through the weekend forward so that they could go over it by detail and get all of the information to decide if they were going to go for a mistrial. And Judge Almeida was like, I'm sorry. Listen, Attorney Cohen, this is paraphrasing for her, but basically she said, I know of no law that allows for me to order the state to write a report to you about something that happened that they just told you about in open court in front of me and the witness and everybody's collaborating it. Why do they have to write you a report? Like, she said, no. And then she said, but of course, if you find any law that says that I need to tell them to do that, please let me know. But it's the way it's just the way that it was done. It, it was great. I mean, this is the same Philip Cohen who actually told her last week to hold on there. And she had to say, excuse me, I'm the judge. And don't you ever tell me to hold on again. Like, I don't know who he thinks he is. He's all like, oh, he's definitely suffering under a little bit of the pressure here. But anyway, Jade Doe 1's testimony was about two events, of course. There was the one in 2000 2004, but there was also the one that was prior to that in 2002, in September of 2002. So in April of 2004 was the concentration on Monday, most of that until they got to Cross. And that is the one with the jacuzzi, you may remember, and focusing on the drink that made her really feel like she lost control. Now, if we will remember, Jane Doe 1 is the one who actively admits that she consented to have regular vaginal sex. Sorry, I'm going to use like the real words here. I don't think many of the people who follow me regularly will be offended. We speak the real language here. We're not trying to trigger anybody, but I think using the real words is absolutely important for getting the message out accurately as to what we're talking about. I don't like to mince it around. She agreed to vaginal sex. She felt altered. She thought she was just drunk because she did have a couple of drinks. The last drink that she had was testified to be given by Danny Masterson. Immediately within a few minutes of this drink, she felt completely altered to where she couldn't control herself. She got thrown into a jacuzzi. She said she couldn't see to the point of blindness. She testified Monday to the fact that she thought her eyes were open and they were all Luke, which was Danny Masterson's friend, who was the only one she remembers actually speaking to during like this event. He's telling her to open her eyes, open her eyes. She thinks her eyes are open already and she can't see it at all. And she was getting very upset. She said she was cold, she was wet. She doesn't remember exactly how she was dressed, but that her legs were naked, so she felt very cold. She does recall that. When asked, is this exactly what you said in this testimony prior in another report and this and that? She said, I can't remember. Like, if you refresh my memory, yes, but I'm telling you like what happened. Some of the words may change, some of how I say it may change, but the events themselves that I recall have not changed at all. Okay. How it got written down, why it got written down, when I said it, that may all be slightly different, but not what I said, what the event is that I'm reporting on. This is when she says she felt nauseous and sick and she couldn't see. And that's when she is testifying that Danny Masterson took her up the stairs to his room and then to a shower because she was getting sick. He was telling her to wash on herself because she was vomiting. He was calling her names. Then she says she kind of fell asleep or went unconscious. She's not sure, but she doesn't recall how she got from the shower to the bedroom. But she was on the bed. They were laughing and giggling. She does report that the defense did make a big deal about that. But she said that she's not saying that that part wasn't actually consensual, although had she not been under the influence of the drink, she may not have agreed to what was going on. She did say that, but she did admit that she did not say no to that at all. What she has the issue with and what got charged was the fact that she woke up hours later, turned over on her stomach, being violated painfully anally. And that's the charge for that penetration there. That's what she's complaining about. That's what she's calling the assault, not the prior. And that is why the defense is making it a big deal. Here's the issue. Legally, in our law, you can consent to one act and not the other. That's true. But the fine line on where that consent stops and goes is a big legal quagmire right now. And this is what we're wrestling with in this trial, because we're talking about women who were in relationships with Danny Masterson, where prior things may have happened or not, where it might not be as clear as there was boundaries where there should have been. We're also dealing with the fact that Scientology teachings themselves had the women doubting what had occurred, had them doubt it. So even though Jane Doe 1 woke up in pain, with a problem, uncomfortable, bruised, violated, she said she screamed, yelled, and fought back. She did. She did. Okay. She did say that she said no. And then when things, and other times when things continued, when she woke up, she also talked about having trying to get a pillow to push him away on the other event, and that he then used that pillow to push back on her until she was back, she says, unconscious or passed out or asleep again. And then she reports that she did have bruising, she did say no, she did scream, she did fall back. Jane Doe 1 is the one who also said that she woke to hearing a loud noise and a loud man's voice, which she is saying could have been knocking at the door, which may have been Luke or someone else, and that Danny went to the door, but that Danny reached into the nightstand to grab a gun first. But she says while she woke up, she was so upset with Danny about what had happened that she also reached into that nightstand to grab it, and that he closed the drawer of the nightstand on her hand, which retorts to, while she says, this is Jane Doe 1, who also says the morning after, when she woke up and finally left, at the urging of Luke, who told her right to go to the presidential center and file a report, that Danny had already been there and filed his report, and that he put her in a cab with her phone and all her stuff and told the cabbie to take her right to the Scientology presidential center. Okay. But she didn't go. She was supposed to meet her family in Florida for her father's celebration, and she was already late. So she gave the cab driver, no, I'm not going there. I'm going to my house. She went to her friends. They were getting ready to go, and she went on the trip. She says that all of the physical problems she developed, she became more aware of as she was in Florida and as she was visiting. And this is where they talk about bruising, which was a big part of the defense. They talk about, does that really look that injured? I mean, you're holding your hand in one picture as if it's hurt, but in the next picture, you're actually holding a cup with a drink in it. So like, how hurt could you have been? Very, very pedantic, in my opinion, but I guess that's what they need to do. I mean, they need to focus on this kind of stuff, because they're not saying he didn't, like, he's not going to speak for himself. Although on that part, they did try to get Danny Masterson to speak for himself this week. They really did. Because during Jane Doe 1's testimony, she mentioned, when we're talking about all the reports that she filed at the police department, but before all of that, knowing that she had to go to the presidential center while she's in Florida, she knew when she got back, she was going to have to go to Scientology and report this. And she did. Okay. And she did talk. She did talk to somebody there, and she had to give a report. Okay. And she did. And the first thing that she was told, which is a repeat also of what Jane Doe 3 was told, was that do not use the R word. That doesn't exist here. That was from Julian Schwartz. That's who she went to. He was an advanced operative in LA. He worked with the advanced organization there, to where they're supposed to go, the authority for her, where her point person was. Okay. He was also, Julian Schwartz, part of her actual first report that she filed with the police, because she took the report that she gave to Julian Schwartz, which she was told clearly not to use the R word, and also could not mention the gun because Danny didn't own a gun. Don't say that. And was reminded about the policies of reporting on people in Scientology on criminal acts. repeatedly. Oh, now this is important because this is why there's a big difference in the first report she made into her testimony from the first trial into this trial and her depositions that she gave to the prosecution when the formal investigation started, when she was out from under the wing of Scientology. Because while she was still under the wing of Scientology, of course, everything that she wrote and did was under their eyes, with their assistance, in their process. And that's a big important difference in this trial compared to the last trial. In the last trial, we were very limited. The prosecution was very limited in how they could actually get that thought to the jury. They weren't allowed to talk about Scientology as a practice, Scientology as a religion, Scientology as an organization that made people do certain things. They weren't allowed to give those kind of details, only to the state of mind of what the actual Jane Does believed. They could only state it if the Jane Doe stated it, and then they could talk about it. But in this time, we're talking about actual differences in reports because we're allowed to actually talk about the process that Scientology put them through. They're actually going into great details about the ethics reviews they took, how they handled it, how many reports they wrote, what were the steps. Did Danny go in or did he not go in? And apparently Danny did go in and give a report. And since defense attorney Philip Cohen decided to really go at Jane Doe 1 again about the drinking, okay? About because she would been a problem. She thought she was going to have a problem with drinking, so she hadn't drank for 9 months. We're talking about the event then where with the jacuzzi in April of 2004, and she had only been drinking a day or two, like, and could it have just been that it was overly effective on her? Did she drink a lot? Like, he's really going in on her about the drinking part of it. And he starts saying, was it one drink? Was it two drink? Was it three? And then he says, well, you said this here and you said this there. And then she refers to, well, I remember in Danny's report, he said that I had two or that the last drink I had was a triple. And when she said in Danny's report, like, Cohen made note of this, and now they're talking about the Scientology report that uh was that he did do. That has not been in evidence yet, and it's not been brought into trial. Okay. But it would be, I guess it would be Danny's version of what happened. So they get to the end of that, and you know, Cohen wants to bring that report in. He wants that whole thing into evidence now, that whole thing. But Judge Olmedo, no, 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 no. Because here's the thing, that would be the defendant speaking for himself without taking the stand. And that can't happen. You don't get to put his perception on what happened or his defense on what happened that way unless he agrees to actually do it himself. Like, no. So it was like kind of a backhanded way to get information to the jury without having Danny testify or defend himself. It is his choice. Danny Masterson can choose to do either. But they can't just submit those as statements from him. He can't be a witness in the defendant unless he's a defendant taking the stand to defend himself. Does that make sense? Like, that's the best way I can put it. Like, he can't be a witness to it, a witness with a statement about it as if it came true, because it would have the weight of the defendant speaking, no matter what. That's how it would be to the jury. And Judge Olmedo is right about that. Well, Cohen was greatly disappointed. He's been greatly disappointed all week. I'll cut to the chase. Hey, not a happy camper because Judge Olmedo's not very happy with him. They're not making the headway that they would like. Okay. They did get to say their piece about, when Jane Doe did say whether she was intimidated or not. And on that matter, Judge Olmedo clearly stated that everyone is entitled to actually come to this trial and watch. But come and watch. Come and watch. Not interfere. Okay? As she said, she clearly said to Cohen when he objected, into Holly, that listen, if Scientology doesn't want to be a part of this trial, maybe they shouldn't be doing things to make themselves part of this trial. Eh? Like, because here's a couple of other things that happen. Like, the defense doesn't want us to mention Scientology, but example number one, Leah Remini shows up, and we know Leah Remini, right? Let me see if I can. Yeah. Okay, so Leah shows up to support Jane Doe 1. They're friends. Okay, she's been supporting her from the start. She shows up. She doesn't do anything or say anything. Do you know the defense subpoenaed her because they're trying to get her away from the trial? They want her out of the courtroom. They don't want her sitting there supporting. They don't want anybody seeing her there. They want her out. They want her out, out, out. And Judge Olmedo says she's there as a support person for Jane Doe 1. She can stay. When asked outright, Sean Hawley was asked if they were going to call Leah Remini as a witness. That's why she was subpoenaed. They said, "We'll see." Like, they don't have any plans. Leah Remini herself says she's not testifying. She hasn't been asked to testify. They clearly just subpoenaed her to try to use that as a weapon to get her out of the courtroom. They're really worried about it. They're so worried about perception at this time. And I don't blame them, because the actions of Scientology themselves right now is greatly damaging to Danny Masterson, because Danny Masterson is acting under the Scientology policies the whole way. And if he thinks it's right to do it, and they think it's right to do it, but to everybody else it looks wrong, he's going to look more guilty, right? I mean, I understand why they're so fearful of it. The reputation that Scientology has is terrible. Absolutely terrible. This is right. 82. I hear you, dude. You know what? I hear you. Hold on a second. Let me get that comment. Why don't they like Leah? Oh, right. Scientology is a cult, a fearful yet manipulative cult. Bingo. Absolutely, absolutely correct. Okay. Listen, that's how far they went. They subpoenaed her. Okay. They also, I mean, let me just tell you the times for mistrial. I think I counted 3, maybe 4 attempts at mistrial. Oh, just in the first 3 days of the week. Oh, but that's like, if you covered the last trial with me last October, then this is like standard procedure for Philip Cohen. Every day he came in and complained that somebody mentioned about Scientology or asked for a mistrial based on something that happened. He did everything he could to get this out of the hands of the jury. Okay. Everything he could. And it's just about the same now. Okay. Including everything that's going on with Jane Doe 1's testimony and all of that. But also on Monday, another thing happened. Not only do we have the mistrial request because Leah is showing up, okay, and they want her like out, and then they don't want the altercation because Judge Olmedo said something while the jury was actually there. He said, no, like, why can't she say she's a support person for Jane Doe 1? He's got exception to that. And then also, when we went to the fact that she felt that Jane Doe 1 felt intimidated on Friday by Vicky Podporeski, who is a Scientology attorney. Everybody knows it. Vicky can say it. Okay, she disappears, she comes back, she makes faces, she does whatever. She was part of the first trial too, or her assistant was there every single day. Okay. If you don't want to be part of this, then why are you there making yourself part of it if you don't want people to know? Like, you can't have it both ways. You just absolutely can't. Um with her experience with intimidation, she's quite aware of some of the back and forth that's going on. Well, let me tell you about one of the weirdest things that happened was Monday. A gentleman shows up in full priest garb with a big old cross hanging on his neck. And he just comes and sits there with another woman who, by the way, ends up to be one of the main journalists or owners of a a a bloggy news magazine type internet posting that really targets people that go against Scientology. That's all I'm going to say on that. Because you know what? I don't want to even say their name because I don't think they deserve the credit. But I will drop this for you all to check out. This is just one article, one hit piece they wrote on someone who's testifying on Wednesday, or something they wrote about the Headleys. That's their style. I'm just not going to support it by, giving the name any cred. Guys know how I am. Like, no, but I don't want to withhold information from you either. So there it is. That much I'll share. Anyway, this priest looking gentleman, very tall, stately, kind of impressive. He goes in and he's sitting there with this journalist. All like, so basically, D.A. Anson brings up during at one point on the break that she got information with someone that person may be connected with Scientology and that they were here to represent Scientology. And so the judge does ask, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm the Reverend Skip Laurie." Okay. And tells him that, where he lives, and he's an ordained Methodist priest. He says that he's only there to protect the religious beliefs of Scientology, their religious rights. He's there to protect all religions, their rights in the court of law. He's there to just see what's going on and make sure that nothing prejudicial is happening, but that he does not actually represent Scientology. He's not a member. He doesn't work for them. Okay. And so, of course, Cohen jumps up and he wants to know who told D.A. Anson that man was was there for Scientology. And Judge Olmedo just said, nope, you're not entitled to that information. Like, basically put her hand up and like, sit back down there, sir. She didn't say that, though. Those are my words. I would have said that, but that's probably why I wouldn't be a good candidate for a judge. Because I'd be like, sit down, sit your butt down. Well, anyway, said, nope, not entitled to that information. But no, apparently I've questioned him. That's what I'm going to do. That's what my job is to question it. I'm satisfied. They can watch. But what happened is during the lunch, like right when they were breaking for lunch, and Judge Olmedo dismissed the jury, and everybody was out in the hallway. And apparently there were a couple of jurors over by the elevator. And this Reverend Skip LaRue was in the hallway. And a popular YouTuber whose name I'm not going to mention because, well, he's not really helping the case when he does crap like this. And I got to say, regardless of how you believe, have some respect for a court of law and the proceedings. And don't be mucking things up for people just because you want stuff to talk about on your channel. Okay. Like, I don't blame people for being upset with this person. And I know a lot of people support him, and that's all great. And I'm not going to say anything else about it. But apparently there was a heated confrontation on the side of this YouTuber raising his voice. The actual reverend is reported as being quite respectful, but he was accusing him of being a fake and there to represent Scientology, and that he knew it, and it was in front of the jury, which is a big no-no. That could have got the whole case messed up, and that's what I'm upset about, is that itself, had it gone farther with more information than just the one statement that he made, could have been a problem. Because as soon as we came back, that Cohen is like calling for a mistrial because he wants a brand new jury now. Because when the judge agreed to question the four jurors, when she found out about it, and she questioned all four jurors that were there and talked to them about, what did you hear? Does it prejudice the way you're looking at this trial, this, that, and other thing? And now 3 of them said it was obvious that the person yelling was against Scientology. And one person said it wasn't clear. They thought they were pro-Scientology. So I thought this was rather bizarre. But that's when Philip Cohen decided he needed a whole new jury. Not because they heard what they heard, but because they heard it differently. And obviously, they can't analyze statements accurately. And he wants a whole new jury because they may have difference of opinion. Now, juries are going to have differences of opinions in how they hear and perceive things. That's why we have more than one on a jury, okay? We have a group of men and women, a whole bunch of them that all have different thoughts, that everything that they hear, they're all taking it in, and not one of them is going to have the same opinion about everything as the person next to them. But their job is to look at everything and come to some kind of consensus amongst them by discussing and giving opinion and saying what they think and just coming to a conclusion. Okay, but no, not in Philip Cohen's eyes. He wants them all on the same page right now, or forget it. No, but I don't even have to finish that story to tell you that he didn't get a mistrial, do I? Yes, I know. And I do understand that the actual altercation itself looked bad and prejudicial. I get that, and I would be worried about that as the defense, but except for the fact that what he went for the mistrial with was rather amusing, except for prejudicial. Maybe he's just tired of getting smacked down on the prejudicial end. I don't know, but he went a different avenue on that one. But again, there was another time that they tried to get a mistrial. Okay, the next time they try to get a mistrial would be because after a day and a half on the stand with Philip Cohen in JD1, Judge Olmedo said, listen, enough is enough. You come back tomorrow. You got 45 minutes to finish with your cross-examination of JD1. Jane Doe 1 will be done with her cross-examination with you in 45 minutes. You could just wrap it up. So he comes back the next day. He's a little livid. He does address things and back and forth. But when he brings up the fact that he wants a mistrial because he was admonished correctly by the judge, because during this cross-examination, not only was he admonished for asked and answered, not by the prosecution, because the prosecution got tired of actually saying it. The judge herself came in and said, I'm going to object by the court for asked and answered. Move on. Now, that's embarrassing for any lawyer. When the judge has to say, I'm objecting for the world, dude, you're out of line. That's basically what she said in plain English. Like that's enough. They had objected on all of this for asked and answered and all of this other stuff. They are not going to let in Danny Masterson's report because that would be hearsay, because Danny Masterson is incumbent as a witness to say himself that that's his report. Just like they're not allowing Jane Doe 1's mother's emails to Scientology in because she's not testifying in the court that those are hers, that she's here, and that's what she said. Same rules go for the defendant. He didn't get his mistrial on that. Now he's all pissed off that he's got only 45 minutes with Jane Doe 1. He's getting really annoyed. He's actually been admonished by the judge already for telling her to hold on, for the tone he uses. Okay. When I tell you she went into a long speech about, hey, when I give an order, that doesn't mean, although I know you love to come back and comment, that doesn't mean you get to comment and tell me that my order is wrong and it's going to change. I get to say the order. And that's the end of it. Like, period. I mean, he's really pushing her buttons. He's being very disrespectful. He actually, she says what it's going to be, and he actually comes at her afterwards like, no, what you say is wrong. We can leave that in as prior testimony. We can leave this in that. She's had to repeatedly admonish him for bringing in testimony from the first trial, which is not allowed. They have to retestify to it to be part of the trial. You're not allowed to do it. That's why they call it a retrial. It's a new trial. Okay. You can't go and actually admonish them on that. You can't bring in that testimony and quote it. He's quoting it back to the witnesses, and she's having a fit. And I don't blame her. I mean, I say it like she's having a fit. She's very calm and very professional about it. But I also understand that she would be extremely, extremely annoyed. Where is she? My judge. There she is. She should be up. Because I'm giving her great credit. Because not only is she currently working on a huge murder trial involving gangs and everything else, she's got to put up with the shenanigans from Philip Cohen and Shane Hawley too. But Shane Hawley just has a different way of doing it. She will try. She tries to be professional about it. She's trying to work with the system. She's speaking with the prosecution in regards to some of her issues, and that will come up when we talk about Claire Headley shortly. But we're still on day one, and all this happened on the first day and into the second day, somewhat. The admonishments and all happened, and the request for a retrial because he was limited to the 45 minutes. That all happened on day 8. I mean, he's just too much, this guy. But he also went with them about Probesky. About that report. Like, he actually thinks he should get a retrial because they did not actually give a report based on what had happened. Okay. But like you said, I don't know. This was a definitely rough 2 days for Jane Doe 1, from Friday all the way through until Tuesday morning. Very, very rough. Tuesday afternoon even. They just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All right. During the second day of testimony for Jane Doe 1, the photos are all being picked at, exactly whether the bruising is showing or not in these photos. And Philip Cohen is very particular about, how come I don't see all this massive bruising? You said your pain was 10 out of 10. You know, you have a smile on your face. Jane Doe 1 is actually countering that by saying, that's what we're taught in Scientology, best foot forward all the time. I'm supposed to act like there's nothing wrong. This is my personal business. I'm not going to tell my family about this. I'm still dealing with everything that's going on. I'm not going to be running around. I didn't go out during the day. I was only out at night. These pictures were taken at night by the pool, etc. You know, he was talking about the position of her hand, whether it was really hurt. How could she be holding it like she's hurt in one picture, and then have a drink in it in the next, be able to hold a drink in it. She says it wasn't broken, it was sore, it was hurt, but she was bruised. She talked about small spots all around her neck where Danny Masterson had choked her. She felt like she was being choked. She did not use the word strangulation, which he tried to accuse her of saying over and over again. And she said, I never used that word. I said, I felt like I was being choked. He put his hands around my throat and pushed, and I was being choked. I lost oxygen. I felt like I lost consciousness. He was twisting her words around a lot. The judge did intervene, or prosecution did intervene a lot. She held her own. It was quite stressful. I can imagine none of us would want to go through that. But as before, like I said, the judge had to keep repeating to him that he wasn't allowed to go into the testimony from the prior trial. He had to go by everything that's in here now, all of those reports, all of those statements, and her answers to them. He's not allowed go back that. When we got into the court during one of the breaks, I would like to also note that, remember last week when Dr. Barbara Ziv testified about percentages in regards to how many erroneous reports, how many false reports are filed on these types of charges. And Holly made a motion to strike that based on the statistical sources being confirmed. And since they didn't have it there in the court at the time, Judge Olmedo said, fine, let's hold off on that. Let's look at that. We'll take care of that. Well, it's Tuesday. Holly, the first thing she said was she would actually ask that we hold off on that. And I think that they're going to be using that in the defense somehow. They're holding off having it stricken because they may have found something that they can use in those statistics, and they can't strike them if they're going to use them for something else. So I'll be keeping an eye on that, as I'm sure some of you will too, because it's quite interesting as to why she would ask for it to be stricken right off the bat, because those percentages of false reports were quite low. If I recall, they were actually really low. Okay. I think it wasn't it was it something like 2 to 8% or something like that, depending, Let me see. There's a question here. Are the Scientologists trying to rush the trial before the Symbiote finishes swallowing Danny's head now. Maybe. I don't know. What is there like something happening with that? Is there a timetable on that, Aaron? I don't know. But it is like something's going with it, you know. Definitely. Definitely. Uh but anyway, there's also a comment in the chat about my bottom banner. It is exactly what it is. It's all the YouTubey things. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's all the things that I hate saying all the time and that everybody reminds me to say. And that's what it is. Okay. that's it's all those things I hate to repeat myself on all the time. But it also what it doesn't say is how much I appreciate you all in the chat and all of the questions that you ask. I do. Yes, I know, AT, that asking a drama llama to be respectful is quite an ask. But here's the thing: it's a court of law. It's a given. I'm gonna ask it. Matter of fact, I don't blame Judge Almeida for demanding it. After all, he went to law school. He feckin' knows better. Don't tell me he don't. Don't. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Liam wants to know if the DJ Donkey Punch name is still being kept from the jury. I haven't heard it yet, but I will tell you that they did not use Danny Masterson's name in the NDA that JD1 was kind of intimidated into filing signing. She did receive some money. She has not been asked to return that money yet. She has been pressured. The NDA was talked about, the whole process of it. They actually submitted into evidence the letters that she received threatening her about being excommunicated based on filing reports against a member, and that she was the one who did it and that she could be um extradited, just not allowed in anymore, not with her family, lose her job, lose her standing, lose everything. She was terribly intimidated, and all that evidence did get entered in. But the reason I mentioned that is the name was not Danny Masterson, it was David Duncan that they used. Um, but they're not mentioning his DJing ways or any of that right now. There was motions about that. It was done in pre-trial, and I don't think they found it probative to put it in. It was more prejudicial, and you could kind of see why it would be. Okay. Mm, there you go. All right. So the judge, when Cohen tried to enter in more information in regards to talking about the report that Danny Masterson filed, I just want to make note that it wasn't the prosecution that actually got that like strict out. The judge intervened herself and said she was not going to allow statements from that report right away. She stopped it, and then they had the discussion later, where Philip Cohen is requesting that it be admitted because, if Jane Doe referred to it, it goes to state of mind. And that is when Judge Olmedo said, I've already ordered on it. You don't get to come back at me and tell me how it's different. Like, she really was pulling it down on that. And basically, after that, we heard from Jane Doe 1's cousin, Rachel, who was there basically during, the rest of day 7. Because, listen, Jane Doe started on the afternoon of Friday, late in the afternoon. She went all day Monday and all day Tuesday. And most of that was with Philip Cohen as the cross examination. All right. They went over the whole events of why she was filing and everything, went into great detail for the jury as to why she filed when she did, what she actually tried to do with Scientology first, which was really, really important because, like, in the first trial, we didn't get to hear as much of all the steps that she had to take in Scientology to actually, be able to actually go forward. She wanted it to be handled. She wanted them to talk to Danny about it. She wanted to get some help for herself because she was confused about it, and she thought it needed to be reported, that the only way he would stop doing this is to be reported. Okay. And she wanted them to help her with it and tell her how to do it. She was trying to follow the rules that they set before her and go through all the hoops that she had to go through. And that was more clearly laid out this time as to how things got convoluted, when the time frame of things happened, how those first reports that got into the LAPD were coming from Scientology and that were written under the guidance of Julian Schwartz. When she wrote them, he was guiding her on how to word things so that she wouldn't get in any violation, nor would she be making accusations that would get her removed and classified as a suppressive person and out, or bring her into ethics review. So she was trying to walk a thin line there, and she was quite confused at the time as far as not what happened, but how to actually deal with it, what to actually she could do about it. Okay. That was most of those 2 days. But then her cousin Rachel comes on. Remember, at the time of the incident, the Florida trip, the JD1 went after the assault the very next morning, got on a plane, went to Florida to be with her family for a planned in advance vacation to celebrate her father. Oh, they're all very close. Rachel at the time was only 17 years old. But Rachel's there to corroborate Jane Doe 1's state of mind, that she was hiding out during the day, that she had marks on her that do not appear as clearly in the pictures that they're showing as evidence as they do in person, that those marks got stronger during the trip and came to surface more, that she told her something that happened, that she told her that something bad happened to her and that it happened at Danny Masterson's house. But she admits she didn't go into great detail of what it was. And Jane Doe 1 did testify that her cousin Rachel's only 17 years old. She's 10 years older than her, and there are things she would not say to her about that. That wouldn't have been appropriate. And I kind of agree with her, and I can understand why she said that. Although she was treating her like a confidant and they were close, I can understand why she wouldn't tell her right out. And again, the defense is asking, who did you tell? When did you tell them? What did you tell them? Why? And I understand they have to ask, but it does border a little bit on victim blaming when you say, well, you should have told everybody right away if it was true. No, that's not true. It's not a matter of truth. It's a matter of dealing with what happened to you. Okay. Just because I didn't go and give a snapshot of everything that's wrong with me that very day to somebody does not mean the event didn't happen. It just meant that I didn't take a snapshot. Okay. But they try to turn it into something else. And that's how you can define victim blaming. When they try to turn the actions of a victim post trauma like that and try to twist everything that they do into meaning it didn't happen, that is victim blaming. That's putting it all on them. And I just don't. That is what's really bothering me lately. It's wait a minute, what are we going on here? Right. I don't know what a link off is, Jujubee, but I hope not. Wait a minute. Okay. I don't like it either, Jujubee. I get it. I get what you're saying. I definitely get what you're saying. I do not like what it is. I want to speak more on it with more educated persons than myself, maybe some therapists and psychologists or people that have been through it, because like this is really, I can't believe in 2023 we're still hearing stuff like that in a court of law, bordering that way. I want fair defense, but there's got to be some balance here on it. It just seems to be, it's so easy. It's like taking the easy way out. That's the only way I can look at it. And as far as like countering all the bruising and everything, that brought another thing to light that Philip Cohen had a big beef with. Like, it seems that the previous attorneys, the ones that got the book of ethics admitted to Scientology and then cried because it was actually used against him. Those attorneys who are no longer Masterson's attorneys, those guys, they had done a motion during discovery, okay, to get the original photos of all these bruises and all, because they were copies and stuff like that. Rachel had taken some people had some, and there were photos that were missing. But there was a request to get those originals through. Okay. Um, Philip Cohen took exception to the fact that when he is questioning about all these bruises not really showing up, and they notice that they're only looking at originals. Okay. They do have the originals of the actual pictures for observation at the prosecution's office, because they did honor the discovery of that. Okay. And when they found out they didn't have it, they tracked Rachel down, they tracked other people down, they got the negatives, they got the original photo color pictures there for view. Okay. It's not uncommon for the defense. It is actually practice for the defense only to get copies and to be told that the originals are on file for them to view. That's standard procedure. Judge Olmedo seemed to have to remind Philip Cohen that, because he's trying to act like because they have these originals and they mentioned it, because Philip Cohen mentioned to the prosecution that they had never provided them and they wanted to see them. And they were like, well, let's just make sure where they are. They follow up. They find out they're on file. They can go see them. And that gets talked about in court. He's now embarrassed, okay, and he's like, no, they're bringing in new evidence. It's not new evidence. It's standard procedure. The originals are here. Here's the copy. That's standard procedure. It's not new evidence. But I think he's embarrassed now because there's better pictures for the jury to see the bruising. And again, might have had his foot in his mouth by opening a door to make the prosecution look better and make the case look more solid and to make his questioning look a little dotty. You want to complain about the bruising and then ask for the originals and then try to get the originals stricken out. No, I don't think so. That was a bit ridiculous. I don't even understand where he was coming from, and I don't pretend to be a lawyer that I would. Okay. I, as a layperson, have no idea why he even made it a big deal when his counter to it was, well, I wasn't the attorney at that time, so I don't know. I thought when you became the counsel for somebody, if you had a prior attorney, that you were privy to all of that. I did. I just don't, I don't understand. Like, I thought that there would be all of the stuff that happened before, the discovery, all of that, the motions. Don't they have access to that? Because, like, I know when I get access to a file, I can see everything that's filed. Why can't an attorney who's now covering the case get access to everything that's been filed on the case? Because let's be clear, the case didn't change. Not the number, not who's involved. It's still Danny Masterson. It's still the state versus Danny Masterson. Same case number. All the documents filed. They're all available there. I'm sorry if you didn't read it, Philip. I'm sorry. But she wasn't having it. Judge Olmedo wasn't having it on that one either. Okay. It was a rough process for Jane Doe too. And then Rachel was in and out pretty quick. Prosecution laid out the time frame, what her state of mind was, how she appeared, collaborating everything that she said, except for there's going to be some differences because Jane Doe did clear that up. Jane Doe 1, she said, I didn't tell her things because of her age. And Rachel will say that. Like that, no, she kind of skirted her. Like she said, it was at Danny's house. She didn't actually say, well, she just said it was something bad. She didn't say. Okay. They were kind of making jokes about the bruising at first, but then as they became more and more prominent, the family started asking questions more and more. And this is why Jane Doe was hiding out during the days and only coming out when most of the relatives that she really didn't want to give this kind of information, because actually she knew how much it was going to be a problem. We have to remember that Jane Doe 1's family was very connected with Scientology, adamant, big donors, huge donors. And Jane Doe 1's mother did, when she found out about it, actually write to everybody at Scientology that she could in regards to it, pretty high up. And she wanted something done. Okay. It made it, Jane Doe was cautious in the beginning. In her testimony, she says she was cautious about it. She didn't know what to do right away. She just knew it was going to be a big mess. She was worried about everybody was going to be in trouble about it. Like she was going to be causing all of this problem for everybody. Okay. Exactly. Thank you, Juju, because I think many people have had this also. I have had deep bruises that hurt but weren't apparent when you look back at me. Exactly. And it takes a while, everyone knows, for bruises to actually come up. And absolutely. Mm, absolutely. Um, that's just like, to me, that's like common sense. And I'm hoping the jury gets a lot of that. Pete, thank you. I guess I do say that a lot. I'm not a lawyer. I don't want anybody to think I'm pretending to be either, because I'm not. I'm going to get a little bit of pushback on that. People are like, why do you like the legal stuff so much? Like, you're not a lawyer. It's a hobby. I just like it. I like looking into it. And it's nice to see you here, Pete. Yeah. Well, anyway, that was Jane Doe 1 and Rachel collaborating it. They really there wasn't much for the defense to push back on except for the bruising and the pictures, and that really didn't go exactly the way that they wanted in the end of it anyway. But on it went on into day 8, okay? Day 8, which is Wednesday, which would have been the 12th day of the trial, but day 8 of testimony. When I count the days, I hope you understand, I'm counting the testimony days. I do not count the jury selection days as the actual trial. I count the trial dates based on opening statements. And yeah. So in the very they finished up with Rachel in the morning session and everything, and they went through all of that. Um then we had in the afternoon, we were going to start with Claire Headley testifying. But of course, the first thing that came up was that Sean Hawley wanted to again ask the court to reconsider having Claire Headley testify as an expert. Because as far as Sean Hawley was concerned, she couldn't be an expert because she didn't have a degree in this. She didn't go to college for it. She was in it for her 30 years from birth. Well, she was a child most of that time, so she doesn't actually have 30 years worth of experience. Um, but there was some pretty good they said that Holly put forward that the prosecution in and the court were giving her more credit than she deserved. And that even cumulative, her experience didn't qualify her as an expert. Um, and for the expert designation. So she again was objecting, even though they went through pre-trial on this, the judge had already ordered. She's just making a note of it. And the state, which was DA Anson, who works with DA Mueller, the young woman at the table, she disagreed. She said her entire education is in Scientology. She's been involved with them all that time. She studied their principles for more than 10,000 hours. And this is an area outside of common knowledge of the jurors. And this is actually valuable testimony for them. And it'll assist them in deciding the part that Scientology played in delaying the reports by the Jane Does. Holly admitted to having a really good working relationship with the prosecution, especially Miss Anson. She said that they actually had a conversation over the weekend and with Miss Headley, and that they really appreciated it, and that she was not going to testify. That Claire Headley is not there to testify but about her personal experience with Scientology. She's not going to talk about things like a lawsuit and harassment her personally by Scientology. She's not there to advocate to what happened to her, or even to say if the Jane Does are telling the truth about what happened or anything to do with the case. She's there to talk about standard Scientology practices that she has been trained in, that she is fully aware of, and that she knows to be standard in to help the jury to understand the practices that led to the situation we're in today. Um uh Holly is pushing back to saying that, because she was a child for some of those 30 years, she doesn't have 30-year experience. She left when she was 30 years old. That's what they're counting it for. So they don't want to tell the jury she has 30 years experience. So Judge Olmedo cites back her previous ruling and that she was very specific about it. And she says she went over everything that Claire Headley brought through as far as documents and her expertise. She says she's going to allow her to testify because and here's what really stuck me. She said a member of a particular group can sometimes qualify as an expert of that group. She cited gang members, for example, and it's particular interesting that according to this report, Scientologists don't approve of or go to higher education. If that were the requirement, Scientologists could never become experts in their own faith. Obviously, a lot has come in, but through the alleged victims. And because there's a broad charge of fabrication from the defense itself, I might note, the defense itself is saying that they're lying and collaborating together because of the civil lawsuit. This is why Judge Olmedo is saying expert testimony makes it more probative. Claire Headley's testimony is more probative for the jury to have, more beneficial for them to make a decision than prejudicial against Scientology, because the defense themselves are saying that the women are making all of this up. And actually, testimony from Claire Headley as to the procedures of Scientology will document why they delayed their reporting. That they didn't delay their reporting just to file a lawsuit later, a civil lawsuit to gain money. There was quite a lot of reason built in their practicing Scientology beliefs as to why they couldn't. She did point out that there are things in Claire's reporting that she doesn't think apply, and that it would be her personal experiences and her personal conditions right now with the civil lawsuits that she's in and things that she's going through. But she says that it's far more probative than prejudicial, and that it can be addressed as testimony goes on. And it's for that purpose and not just a broad spectrum of Scientology practices. Holly said that she understood, defense attorney Sean Hawley said she understood the ruling, but that we've already heard so much about Scientology. She said Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3 both already spoke about everything about Scientology. However, it's more important that they hear it, that it was standard, because otherwise it's just there. And since the defense is saying that everything that they say is a fabrication, then the jury does need another source to hear why they took as long as they did to report and why they felt the way they felt when the incidents occurred and why nothing was done. Why the defense is allowed to come at them as, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do that? And when they came with a vehicle, Claire Headley, to say why, because this is the procedures in Scientology, they don't want it in. They don't want the counterbalance in there. Okay. They just want the doubt that what they're saying is true or why they said it. And it's not. It's not. I mean, the Headleys do have a civil lawsuit, and that is part of the discussion that goes back and forth. They're talking about fees that the Headleys were ordered to pay by Scientology and etc. based on things that they did. There's accusations from Scientology against Mark Headley for embezzlement. Both of them were very big in Scientology for a long time, and they're both out. All right. The judge clearly says they're not going to get into any of that. Okay. DA Anson then goes out to talk to Claire Headley to make sure that, she understands that her testimony is supposed to stay within certain guidelines as to the practices that she learned in Scientologies to be their standard practices, to help define terms. Remember, there's a lot of language that's used right now in this trial in regards to Scientology that the jury may never have heard. I mean, just one like suppressive person. Okay. All the abbreviations they use and things like that. Somebody from Scientology or has knowledge of it is actually beneficial for the jury to actually understand the situation, even the testimony that's already been given. So I like the first question that DA Ariel Anson, that's who did the direct for Claire Headley. Of course, Judge Olmedo is sticking to her guns. She did allow the objection of Sean Hawley on file, as she would. They made their objection. They shot it down. Sorry. We're not going to get into anything outside of the scope, but she's coming in. This is what we're going to do. This is very different from the first trial. And this is very beneficial for the jury. I'm not sure. I think it leans more to beneficial for the prosecution because it does give a greater understanding of where the women were coming from and why it delayed and what they believed in, why they didn't actually think of the R word right away, why they were confused and why they didn't know what to do and why they went to the church and then did what the church wanted them to do. Um, it does straighten all that out for them. So it's very good on the prosecution side. But understanding the clear language of Scientology and not having them misrepresented in any way, misrepresented in any way, is also beneficial to Danny Masterson in the defense because it's just to represent them in the light that they are. Now, if they're bad, they're bad. If it's a policy that the jury just thinks is absolutely insane, it is what it is. But actually, to have it accurate is important and not just based on the victims, the alleged victims and accusers, their interpretation of it. Okay. I think it's very good for the jury. If I was on a jury, I would definitely want to hear it. Very first question from D.A. Anson was, what is Scientology? It's an applied philosophy that members apply to all aspects of their life, work, friends, family, and so forth. And she said, are there laws that members obey? Yes. And then they go into how she was first exposed to it, and they go into some history there. But they talk about the different kinds of organizations. They talk about what she did, you know. She was in RTC. It's a policing organization that enforces Scientology. In other words, she was part of the group that makes sure that people are actually following what Scientology puts out there as their base laws for members. Okay. She talks about the different groups. There's an advanced organization of Los Angeles. That's where Schwartz was, where Jane Doe 1 actually went to him. That's the Advanced Organization of Los Angeles, to where she put her first claims in about Danny and what had happened to her. We talked about that. There's also the Celebrity Center, which Danny attends on a regular, the Flag Service Organization in Florida, the Office of Special Affairs, that deals with all the legal and the PR. There's just all different samples that she gave of different names for organizations within the umbrella of Scientology. Okay. They talk about Scientology doesn't approve of college. That's not how you get your education in Scientology. In your education and qualification in Scientology comes from the courses that you do only within Scientology. One question was, how do Scientologists view Scientology rules as opposed to the outside? And Claire said that the rules are direct, how you respond to any situation. And they have to take priority or senior to. And that's how well you apply those laws of Scientology really matter. That's what makes you senior and progress. Okay. She was asked directly if there was a conflict between a Scientology rule or law and a regular U.S. law or a law outside. What is it that a Scientologist must do? And Claire Headley testified that according to Scientology, you have to follow the law of Scientology first. She was asked if there was an internal justice system inside Scientology, and they said yes. She was asked if it was a crime to turn in another member of Scientology. And she said that there was a process of that known as a knowledge report, and you have to go inside Scientology to do it. And that they will determine the steps to be taken, but it will all be done within Scientology. She was asked about an ethics officer. What is an ethics officer? And that is a person responsible for seeing to it that Scientologists adhere to their requirements as to their behavior, their participation in Scientology, etc. And the ethics officer oversees the laws at an organizational level and deals with any reports that come in. She was asked if there was an actual ethics office in the advanced organization of LA where the Jane Does went, and she was also asked if that would be the same would is that if the ethics officer assigned to the advanced organization would be the same as the ethics officer as the celebrity center, and she was told no, they would be different people. um then they talked about the knowledge report, what that actually is. And that's where she explained that that's where you write up details of transgressions. For example, if someone would write something negative about Scientology, you would write something about that person to an ethics officer. Little bit of a side note. You know, you'll remember from the first trial, perhaps, and it has been mentioned with Jane Doe 3 particularly, and a little bit of Jane Doe 1. Um, during this week, how they all met. How did the Jane Does actually meet? And in the testimony of Jane Doe 1 this week, I actually read that it was Bree Schaefer that brought up Jane Doe 3's name first to Jane Doe 1. She literally asked Jane Doe 1 to do an ethics on her, an ethics in regards to, we had heard this before where someone like gets friendly with you and then tries to find out what you know about something and everything, and in order to do a knowledge report for Scientology in regards to where they were coming from. Okay. And Bree had said what Jane Doe 3 was upset about. She said, why would I want to do that, Jane Doe 1? And she said, well, she's upset about XXX. And Jane Doe 1 was like, she didn't want to do it. Bree had told her she needed at least 5 people to do ethics reports on Jane Doe 3, on what was going on with her. But Jane Doe 1 did not meet Jane Doe 3 at that time. She backed away. She said she wasn't comfortable doing it. Well, it's funny that they complain about them all knowing each other, and it was actually Scientology that tried to stick them together in the first place. I found that a bit ironic, a bit ironic. And I'm glad in a way that Jane Doe 1 kind of like thought it to be quite an affrontage to what would be the right thing to do, and chose said she just didn't feel comfortable with it. She didn't think it was the right thing to do, and she didn't. So I give her credit for that. Um, so then here they're talking about what a knowledge report would be. Um, you can actually write a knowledge report on yourself, which Jane Doe 1 had to do, Jane Doe 3, everybody did in regards to what. And there's also this other report called Things That Shouldn't Be Report. Um, and Claire, she kind of straightened out that there are many, many types of reports in Scientology. But the things that shouldn't be report is when you don't know exactly who is at fault. So in a situation which the Jane Does are complaining in regards to Danny Masterson on what he may have done, and they're all in relationships with him, then things that shouldn't be report might be the one that they would fill out on someone, because they don't want to say who's responsible for what, and they're not accusing anybody of a crime. Um, it's when you don't know who is at fault. She explained that if she were to write a knowledge report on you, for example, I would be required to send you a copy. But in a that shouldn't be report, you're not required to send a copy. It just stays within Scientology. Mostly because you don't know what the facts are, but you know there's a violation and you're asking an ethics officer what to look into it to get more detail. So in other words, like, you have an idea that something's going on here, but you don't want everybody that you're mentioning to know about it until you find out what the clear thing is, because you don't want anybody to get dragged into it unnecessarily. But you want someone to look into it, you know. So they asked like how they get written. Do you have, how are they written? Do you have to go to a location? And she said it really depends on who you're talking about. If you're in the Sea Org, you would write at your desk. Civilians may write in the ethics department. There's not a fixed location. Everybody writes where it is, and it depends on the circumstance. You may be asked to come in like Jane Doe 1 and write your knowledge report right there with them. Um, uh, During all of this, the word handling came up. So she was asked to explain what handling actually is. And in Scientology, she explained, when there's a transgression and you're having a problem with your position, maybe struggle with your boss, an ethics officer will give you steps to help you address the situation. If and so that's called handling. Like when they're actually advising you on what to do about a situation, that's when they're calling it handling. So she was asked in further detail if someone went and reported to an ethics officer that another member may have committed a crime. Um, is there a role the ethics officer would take in writing that report? And she said yes, that there is. That they made a code in 1997 for implementing for things of a sensitive nature, like rape, but they were no longer to be written in reports. Copies go to RTC or OSA, and so they would use codes to remove those terms. In other words, they're not allowed to put that in writing anywhere without it being stricken from the record, regardless if that's being reported or not. That was very valuable information for the jury. Don't you agree? Like that is something that absolutely pertains to exactly what the women are talking about, that they were told immediately that doesn't exist, which caused the state of mind that made them delay. Like, I've just been through something. I'm not sure it is, but they're telling me that's not what it is. Like, it can't be. These women believed in Scientology when they were there. And that's something that everybody seems to forget. They're out now and speaking against it, and speaking for themselves. But at the time, they very much were looking to Scientology to help straighten this out for them. And they let them down. And they made the problem worse. And they made the problem worse for Danny Masterson, too. That's how I look at it. They made make it worse for everyone, including themselves, by that policy. Well, so they talked about whether they're handwritten or they're typed, talked about, some of the terms. Good standing. It refers to your status as Scientologist. If you're attending 12 and a half hours of training per week, you're donating, you're bringing in other members, you're not talking negatively. All of these equate to good standing. Okay. As long as you're not violating, Scientology laws. Ethics protection is a policy written by Hubbard, which refers to the fact that Scientology or a staffer or member of SO is in good standing and doing what is expected of them, then they have ethics protection. And if a report is received on them, it should be filed with a yawn. And that was in quotes. And so they were asked, what does filed with a yawn mean? Filed in a person's ethics file and take no further action. Now, this is important because you'll remember from Jane Doe 3's testimony and Jane Doe 1 that both of them were told that those reports would be filed and that they would be in Danny's folder for when he wasn't in good standing and could be addressed. And that Danny himself said, go ahead, go file a report, go tell anybody you want. I'm in good standing. He said that to one of the Jane, I believe it was Jane Doe 3. Go ahead and file your report. I've already been there. It doesn't matter. I'm in good standing. I'm doing what I need to do. For me, that's one of the hardest things to wrestle with, is the church was actually creating a scenario to where what happened was okay. And they're not even going to talk to him about it at all. Because it's, in their eyes, actually okay. Let that one settle in. You know who should really be on trial here next, right? She was then asked if you've heard of the term human emotion and reaction, which is HE&R. She says that is a term that means any emotion, and that's not something you want to be expressing in your communication when writing your reports. Nothing like grief or anger or anything like it. So she was asked, when writing a knowledge report, what's the policy about including it? You're supposed to only write about the facts, nothing else. All right. Then here's the big one. She was asked, what does the word victim mean in regards to Scientology? In Scientology, Claire Headley testified that victim is a negative term in Scientology. You are low on the emotional tone scale, which is states of being from low to high. In the middle is a 0.0, body death. 0.1 is victim. Hubbard talks about that. Anyone below 2.2, 2.0 rather, is succumbing. That is what Scientology endeavors to improve. Anyone who is in a lower tone level is likely to lie and can't be trusted. Victim is 0.1. And victim is a negative word that Scientologists do not use. If something bad happens to you, it's because you have committed bad transgressions. It's because you bring it in. To remember, in all of the Jane Doe's testimonies, they have all said that they wrestled with the fact, what did I do to cause this? Because the only reason this happened is something is off with me. Which often with abuse victims will have that thought anyway. We heard testimony in other trials, and in this, we heard it in the Carroll trial. I've heard it in this trial. I've heard it in many other trials. That the victims will wrestle with, what did I do to cause this to happen to me first? Rather than look at it as, I didn't deserve it. Someone just violated me, treated me less than, non-human, like a possession. No one has the right to do that. But our first instinct is to always figure, what did I do to deserve this? It's human nature. And it's really strong when something traumatic like that happens. It's just almost instinctual to try to figure it out. Try to find some way to make it that it wasn't what it was. And they're just saying right here that these women were already pre-programmed that they couldn't be a victim. They wanted to know what steps would be taken if a crime got reported. And an ethics officer would determine what steps were necessary. And Claire Haley said, yes, it had to be an ethics officer. If a victim wants to take it outside, what is the process? And she said that it would be required to have special authorization to do that through the IGC, which was the International Judicial Center. We heard about that. We heard that Jane Doe 1 in her testimony, she filed to Mike Ellis because he was the head at that time, and that she had to actually write to him about it and wait for permission for him on how to handle anything, and received back a threatening letter that should she go through with that she would actually be on the list and probably be considered a suppressive. It would be acts against the church. She received that letter in June of 2004 after she tried to get a hold of him. Here is clarification that what Jane Doe 1 is saying as to her trying to follow the policy, she actually did everything that Scientology asked her to do. She asks, what happens when you ask for permission from the IJC and it's denied? What if they don't listen and go outside, like to law enforcement? And Claire Headley testified about what the Jane Does were afraid of, that it would be classified as a high crime, also known as a suppressive act, and you would be named a suppressive person, and you would lose connection with other Scientology, and also could result in you being expelled. She was asked what a non-interpellation order was, and the non-interpellation order was mentioned by Jane Doe 1 just that day before she did receive one when she tried to get permission to go to the authorities in regards to what she thought was a crime, when she realized that what happened to her was not right. It was not right. Scientology's version of a non-interpellation order is like a gag order. Interpellation is disturbance. So when you're said you get a non-interpellation order, it means no cause of problem, no disturbance, don't rock the boat, keep quiet. You just don't say anything about this. This is going to be a problem. Okay, it's basically what it is. She testified that you're not allowed to cause a disturbance anymore. We know what you're doing. We know you got something to say, but you need to be quiet. You'll put on notice publicly by a piece of paper on a notice board, and everyone in the org knows you are under that gag order, and everyone will tell on you if you talk about it. Okay. And if you do anything else causing upset, you could be declared a suppressive person right at that time. Um, she asked if you're declared a suppressive person, can you be expelled? And she said, yes, you can actually get expelled from Scientology. She said, "Is there any?" The DA answered and asked her if there was a special handling for someone who is declared. And she said, yes, they are ordered to complete 80E steps to make a confession of crimes, pay back money, make up damage, do ethics conditions to get back into good standing. The only person you can talk to during that is the IJC, who would then approve that you've done the steps restoring you to good standing. But you're not allowed to have any association with other Scientologists during the process. She was asked if an individual is speaking negatively about Scientology, is there a policy about how that person can be handled? If we're talking about a civilian, she said, a knowledge report would be written by that, and they would be called in to talk to an ethics officer to address what's going on. What about a person who's been declared? What if they're speaking negatively? Well, if we're talking about someone who is in Scientology's eyes an enemy, there may be policies of fair game, which are to discredit, destroy, utterly, and undermine them so they do not speak negatively about Scientology anymore. So she basically just confirmed everything that Jane Doe 3 and Jane Doe 1 have testified to date in this retrial about the harassment. Because remember, again, in this retrial, we're allowed to talk about Scientology harassing all three Jane Does. They're allowed to talk about how they've been. Jane Doe yesterday actually said Tuesday rather actually said when asked, "Have you been harassed by Scientology?" Yes. Is it ongoing? Yes. Even more so today than before. She put on trial right there. She put out for everybody that, yep, they're at it. Like right now, even more than before. Cedric, Jane Doe 3's husband, testified on Friday about one of the main reasons for filing the civil lawsuit was to recoup money they lost from having to move, losing jobs, losses like unbelievably left and right, and also for the fact that both of their children are in therapy from the harassment, from people peeking in their windows, harassing them everywhere they go, knocking on their doors. They actually Jane Doe 3 testified to being hacked. The defense actually brought in an email that proved it. Let her talk about it on the stand. How being hacked and exposed, not being able to trust their electronics, and having to double check everything, receiving threatening phone calls, receiving threatening emails. She received images of her own backside that were put out as an ad that she wanted people to contact her for privileges of sorts. I'll put it that way. We're talking real hardcore harassment here, not the like, yeah, hey, I know what you did last summer and make a movie. No. This is ongoing for years. And now it's all part of this trial, even more than the last. Anyway, she was asked when she left. She had to talk about leaving in January of 2005. She's asked straight out if she knows the victims, and she does not. If she's had any conversations with them face to face, and she has not. And then because it was going to come up, they do have to talk about her being part of the Aftermath show. And the Aftermath is an organization which Claire Headley is part of with her husband that helps people who leave Scientology. Yes, they do. They talk about it. They get services. They help work with these people a lot, and they are part of it. There's a couple of YouTubers that are part of it also that speak out, ex-Scientology that you may know. But they did want to actually bring that up willingly because they're not being prejudicial here. They're only here to talk about what she knew were policies before. And they don't want to appear like they're hiding anything. Okay. They talked about a finale for that show that she was on. That she was in other episodes, but she was in the finale. and she was an audience member, and she asked how many guests appeared on the finale. They said 6 or 7, that it was about 2017 or 2018, and they asked if one of the guests on that show was a person by the name of Jane Doe 3, and they said yes, that she was there. And then also asked if she was there, did you actually ever have a conversation about the facts of this case? She said, we have not. And that again, she was one of 200 plus people in the audience, okay, and that she did not actually have a conversation. Just because she was there on panel does not mean that she had a conversation with her. She was in the audience, Jane Doe 3 was on the panel, they didn't have any communication. Also, Claire Headley's lawsuit was brought up, that she filed, she sued the church in 2009, and it was dismissed, and that she was ordered to pay their attorney's fees, which she did pay. Um, they also wanted to know her relationship to Martin Witt, who is on the defense's list. She said that he was her stepfather from when she was 8 until she was 16. And he gave up parental rights so that she could join the SO. The latter part was objected to by the defense, and it was stricken because of the giving up of parental rights or whatever. She said, do you still have a relationship with him? And she said no. And then asked if he was still in Scientology. She said yes, he was. She was also asked, when someone leaves and is deemed a suppressive person, can members still have a relationship with? And she said no, they can't. It's policy. And so then they talked more about the Aftermath Foundation, that it's a nonprofit organization. Claire Headley's the treasurer, and that she's been the treasurer since January of 2018, and that her time is entirely voluntary. She's not given a salary. She was asked what the Aftermath Foundation does, and Claire explained that it helps people leaving Scientology. It helps them build a new resume, get a GED. She said she's even taught someone how to drive a car if necessary. They try to do whatever they need to acclimate them to work to life outside of Scientology. She was asked if she was paid to testify. She's not. Okay, any of it. Her travel ticket was paid for. Okay, that's it. Okay, so defense attorney Holly then takes over. Um, and they wanted to talk about the two hierarchical charts of learning and training within the church. And Claire was trying to clarify, like, you're referring to the grade chart or the bridge to total freedom, which covers the counseling and training levels that Scientologists are expected to move up. And she was asked, do one of those charts go up to 12, OT 12? And she says, well, it actually goes up to OT 15. She said 1 to 112 and 1 to 115. And on one of them, you went up to 4, and on the other one, you went up to 8. So Claire had Claire Claire was asked to actually specify what level she was on those charts. And then Sean Hawley actually uses that and says, do those relatively low levels you achieved during your training, like, is that it? And she said, they do not in terms of my management training. And then, she's trying to discredit like how much she actually knows about the system. She goes about that what she did as a child. Well, apparently Claire Headley actually started working for the Sea Org at 14. There have been suits about children having to work in the Sea Org at that age, and several of them have had some setbacks lately, but there's quite a few class actions on there with several members that have left that were actually children brought into Scientology, and then at a very young age, away from their parents and working more than 40 hours a week um, in this organization. Uh, Child labor practices, basically. Okay. They talk about the Aftermath Foundation. She wants to know like how the name came up, and Claire says she didn't come up with the name, but I think it refers to the TV show that they were on called The Aftermath. Okay. Um, she asked if she had a close relationship with Leah Remini and Mike Rinder, and she admits yes, they're close. Um, she asked if Mike Rinder connected her with Mr. Mueller, the DA, and she said yes. She asked if there was anybody from the Aftermath Foundation in the back of the courtroom that could have been talking about the YouTuber. He said, yes, he's on the board of the organization. How long have you known him? She said they appeared on the final of the Aftermath TV show and on other occasions. And in that finale, one of the Jane Does was there as a guest. And she said, yes. And she told you about an interesting about Mr. Masterson on the show. And she said, I don't recall. Well, if we were to demonstrate that that occurred at the finale and you were there, did you leave it all? She said, I stepped out for about an hour or two, but I was there for most of the filming. Do you remember Jane Doe 3 talking about her experiences? She said, I'm not sure. I'm not remembering the whole show. I says, you are aware of the allegations in this case? And she says, no, I have not followed it. Were you a guest? And then they bring up a tweet that says, well, yes, you did follow it because you made a tweet that says, I've been following the case. And again, this was in response to a podcast episode when she said, I was not following the day-to-day specifics of the case. I actually was just talking about a podcast episode that I had reviewed. Okay. She said, you've also tweeted about the case. She says, I don't recall making any great tweets about it. She shows her a tweet from a while ago, back in 2019. She goes, this was back in 2019. I will have to take, but in order, it might be something referred to something that was said in 2019, but it doesn't have anything to do with this trial currently right here, which was the insinuation. Then they go over all of the things about the reports. There wasn't really any contradicting information. But on the redirect, and this is important because D.A. Anson very cleverly put the focus back to the jury on why Claire Headley is there. Because during the cross-examination, you could tell by the questions that Sean Hawley is trying to lay down to the jury, at least in my understanding and my perception of it, that Claire Headley might have an ulterior motive. That she's saying she doesn't know anything about this case, but she's clearly here to help this case. That if Jane Doe did say that Danny Masterson did anything to her on that show, then Claire Headley obviously knows all about it because she was in the audience. Okay. It is a statement that's a small kernel of truth, but not a whole kernel of truth fact, like a closed book. If she was there, she may know a little bit about it, but it doesn't mean anything. Did she tweet about something? There's many people that have left Scientology that are retweeting stuff about Danny Masterson all the time, that are listening to podcasts that are going out about it. But was she involved with the case? No. Like, she was actually listed for a witness in the last one. Mike Rinder is the one who said that Claire Headley was willing to give information on the protocols and stuff because she had been up at and as an ethics officer. And since a lot of this trial is giving information in regards to what ethics officers did with the Jane Does when they went to report Danny Masterson to Scientology, and one of the big reasons why they did not go forward. The main, one of the main. The other one could have been shame, embarrassment, not even understanding what happened and not wanting to believe what happened, especially after told that that couldn't have been what happened because it doesn't exist in something they believe in the guidelines and the beliefs of Scientology that at the time they were a part of and believed in. They were told it couldn't have happened. All right. So, D.A. Anson asked her straight out, are you here to testify that the victims are credible? She says, not at all. Are you qualified to give any information about the facts of this case? She said, no. You were at the final episode and you observed potentially Jane Doe giving statements. She said, I'm not sure what she covered. I think she made general references to the case. Were you present with any other of the Jane Does talked about their cases? She said, no. The Ortega podcast, which is the one that Sean Hawley is accusing her of promoting and being on. She gave her opinion about that the victims were credible. She said, not that I remember. I was only talking about the ethics procedures as to how they would handle anything. In other words, what she understood as to the internal workings of Scientology and what the women would have went through when they tried to report. Holly asked about making a record of the YouTuber and Tony Ortega, the YouTuber who caused the disruption. All right, and also Tony Ortega, who were pointed out in the back row because they actually do stuff. She just wanted to make a record that they were both there. There were no further questions. Judge Olmedo says that concludes for the day. But then after that, um, the jury left for the room. And Holly said that, you know, she wanted to speak, and she said, we have had conversations with DA Mueller and Anson concerning what entrances the jury might make by virtue of the brouhaha, which was what the YouTuber caused. And the YouTuber is not Tony Ortega, by the way. It's not Chris Shelton either. So don't even. The brouhaha that was caused in the hallway, okay? Now the jury has to go in a special door. Okay. And Holly brings forth that that's prejudicial to Scientology because it means they're sequestered and that they may feel they're being sequestered against Scientology doing something to them. She states that, that testimony about Scientology and harassment, you guys keep bringing all this up, and this is laying a foundation to where if anything happens, they think it's Scientology harassing them, and now they're sequestered, and that's just not fair. And Judge Almeida just comes out. She said, I wouldn't call it sequestering. It's a partial sequestering. The defense and the DA brought to our attention a heated conversation between a man wearing a collar and a cross and Mr. YouTuber. The court did a full inquiry. 5 jurors said they heard something. Most said they hadn't heard much of anything, except for juror 20, who happens to be a court reporter. The court made a finding that they didn't hear anything that was prejudicial. The court decided because these hallways are small and there's a lot of case going on in trial right now, and they back up that we didn't want to have jurors standing around anyone with an interest in the case. The court decided that we'll keep them in at lunch, and we're providing them lunch. And at the end of the day, they are being taken out of a different elevator so they don't have to ride down with any interested parties of the case. So if there was a second incident, these jurors never witnessed it. So I think it is to the benefit of the defense that the jurors are not being subject to anything, whether it is anti-Scientology or pro-Scientology. And we both have groups in the audience. If you want me to give an admonition to the jurors that the court is providing them lunch or escorting them out of the building had nothing to do with the parties in this case, well, just that it's because the hallways are so busy, I'm happy to write something up and run it by both sides. And she said, maybe we make attempt. Holly comes forward with, I would like you to make an attempt at an admonition to the jury for that. So that's she says, we can do that. We will work on that. But, no mistrial, no foul, no harm here. Nobody's trying to hurt you in regards to Scientology. They're trying to prevent further incidences from happening. Okay. And no one's trying to make them think that they're being sequestered because of Scientology. All right. On that, I'm going to look for some questions. That's 3 days worth. Let's see. Yeah, let's see here. Oh, I agree with you always. It's so common for victims to blame themselves. It's how they try to reason and make sense of the violation. I absolutely. Yep, Paula, Dianetics. That's how Hubbard introduced this absurd cult through that Dianetics book, First Out. I actually thought it was a sci-fi book at first because he was doing sci-fi writing. But yep. I've read a few of his sci-fi novels and short stories and anthologies. Some is good, but the bad is awful. Yes, it is. The one he wrote, Dianetics, is the worst, Liam. Paula, these cults prey on the innocent, and we don't have the resources to stand up to the powers that be. We are raised to trust. At least I was. I very much hear that. I really do. Thanks, Paula, and good to see you here. Hubbard, I've seen nothing but evil from Hubbard. He claimed an unapproved therapy for autistics. Industrial breach will just take away autism away from the child. I often wonder about Travolta. Oh, yeah. I know. They don't believe in medical intervention, but they're quite willing to come up with their own. Okay. They really did work hard to try to discredit Claire Headley, but I'm thinking it's kind of a 50-50. It is true that she belongs to an organization that helps ex-Scientologists and she's not pro-Scientology. But it's also true that she has enough knowledge of Scientology to speak on it. Um, Absolutely. And I did not put her picture up just in case anybody. This is Claire Headley. And put this one up. This is Claire Headley right here. Um, I do think Holly reached very hard on that with the jury. However, they're going to at this point, I mean, with all of the latitude that has been added into them being able to speak on Scientology, we have to admit the fact here that when you add Scientology to the mix, it's just very negative on the side of Danny Masterson. So it does make that hill so much harder for the defense to climb. Okay. That's why they're going so hard at their testimonies. They're going so hard on the reports that were filed because they're really not going to be able to go against what Scientology put the women through and are still doing. Um, because now they're allowed to talk about the harassment, they're allowed to bring that all in, actually particulars about Scientology as long as it pertains to the process the women went through. They're not going to talk about anything else. Like what Shill just mentioned in regards to their thinking about other things scientifically or and treatment plans and stuff. They're not allowed to talk about all that other crazy stuff that we all talk about regularly out here about them. They only can speak on Scientology in regards to how it relates to what the women went through before and after, what they believed because they were Scientologists and how it affected them in the reporting. Because remember, these are really old events that are being charged. The early 2000s being charged in 2020, okay, against Danny Masterson and coming to trial in 2023. It's about. Hey, morning, Sin. I hope you have a good day at work. Thanks for cruising through. We're just about wrapping up here, but it's nice to see you. Mm. Tony says Scientology was created out of a conversation between Hubbard and Heinlein about how easy it would be to start a religion. Hubbard started Scientology and Heinlein wrote Stranger in a Strange Land. Stranger in a Strange Land. I read that one too. And yes, I remember this. I do. This is just one of those little notes that makes it so absurd as to how this came about and how it's so huge that it is. But one cannot deny the damaging effects that it's had on multitudes of people. More people are speaking out about it than are actually pro about it anymore, is to what I see. I don't know if my world is just smaller or jaded. I'm just saying from my perspective, I don't see the benefits. The only benefit is the one that everyone has in joining any type of organization, and that would be inclusion and feeling a part of something. But in the end, the stuff that it eliminates from your life is major, okay, and the rules seem to be too much. And let's be honest here, it's all their rules. They're all just their rules and they're totally different from everything else, in even in regards to how they follow the law. Now Scientologists will tell you, no, we're never told not to follow the law. Like if we're not, but it would seem that the actual process itself says otherwise, that you have to follow their laws first and primary. And it doesn't matter in that a crime was committed and they were not allowed to go forward and report it. When I say not allowed, of course they could have. Nobody tied them up, okay? Nobody locked them in a room. Nobody took away all their resources or anything to do it. But they did put pressure on them with beliefs and with actual extra threaten to with excommunication. Lose your family, lose everything you know if you actually report this crime, because you can't report a crime because it's not a crime. That's the other part of it. The psychological damage that was done to the women by saying what happened to them was not a crime. If anyone dares ask why they would want to report after all of this, after being harassed, after being told what happened to them, it's not a crime. It couldn't possibly be. There's your answer. There's your answer. The longer they deny the rights of the person not to be abused in such a manner, the fact that they were treated less than, told that they probably did something to deserve it. Scientology is the biggest procreator of victim blaming. They say they have no respect for victims. They put anything that goes wrong with anybody's life, it makes them a victim. And you know why? Let's just call it what it is. Because the longer they make them feel like they're a victim, the more they got to pay for those ethics things to get up back in good standing. Because let's be clear, they ain't giving you those ethics reviews for free. You pay for every course. You pay for every punishment. You pay for every hoop you got to jump through. And severely. Monetarily. They make the money by making the rules so hard. It's the most successful, raunchy, evil proposed LMM I've ever thought of as a cult. It's a cult already. It's a cultish MLM. It's just a money-making propaganda machine. Yeah. Not that I know of, Tony. That's a good question. No. Has anybody asked John Travolta or Tom Cruise for their opinion on this case? I really don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. Aren't the reporters giving vetted questions for those two? You mean for Travolta and Tom Cruise? They may be. Whenever they want to do an interview, there is very like you can only go so far. There's only so much you can talk about. They actually have to vet the questions. I do believe that that's true. I've heard that, Liam. I have to look for it in writing. Well, the last time that Cruz was asked questions were not on the list. He got a video of his claiming to know more about psychology than psychologists. This was the one he was dancing around saying nobody needs medication. I think I know what you're talking about there, Liam. I remember that. But on that, I think we've covered all 3 days of trial. Now, instead of coming back tomorrow and doing today and Friday, like I said, I'm going to be back on Monday. But Saturday night, we have Mayhem. So I won't be going for the whole weekend. I'm also paneling as usual over on the shows for the weekend. So you can catch me there. Like if you really need to hear me, if you miss me, you know where to find me. I'll be on the shows Saturday with the Operator Starsky update for the Ukraine. And then on Sunday, we've got Uncalled For. And I do believe that we are talking about Tucker Carlson in Fox News. Fox News mostly. And maybe a little Elon Musk, because I saw some stuff about him in NPR today that just made it topical for me. Well, anyway, I'll be over there. But tomorrow, Saturday night, 10 o'clock for Mayhem. And that's a little different, a little less serious than this was. But hopefully, if you're into it, we'll see you over there then. But on that, I think that's it for the question. I don't see any other really big questions here. One last thing from Always. I believe that part of Cruz's team were some trying to intimidate Remini from being at the trial. There's been so much stuff going on Twitter against like everybody. Like even myself, my DMs and like some things that I'm getting on Twitter are like, ooh, like they're really coming out in forces, you know. Hey, Sin, have a great weekend, everybody. You know, have a good day at work. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the questions. Okay. And hopefully I will see you during the weekend. If not, Monday, right back here for some more true crime.